The laughter reached her before the stones did. It spilled across the clearing in sharp, careless bursts, echoing between the tall pines and the pack hall's cold stone walls. It was the kind of laughter that didn't need words to wound. It already knew where to strike. She kept her head lowered as she crossed the packed earth, arms wrapped tightly around the figure she carried. The Nutcracker was heavier than it looked, solid and unyielding against her chest. The wood was cool this morning, chilled by the night air, but she welcomed the weight. It grounded her. It reminded her she was not entirely empty. "Look at her," a voice called out, loud and delighted. "Still carrying that thing around like it's alive." Another laugh followed, sharper than the first. "Maybe it's her mate. God's no wolf would want her." The words slid under her skin with practiced ease. They always did. She had learned long ago that reacting only fed them. Silence was safer. Silence hurt less than hope. A small stone struck the dirt near her bare foot. Dust puffed up, coating her toes. She didn't jump. She didn't look up. She simply adjusted her grip on the Nutcracker, careful not to scrape the cracked paint on his red coat. "It's all right," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "We'll go home." Someone snorted. "There she goes again. Talking to wood." "She's cursed," a woman said, her tone thick with disgust. "No wolf, no strength, no mate. Just empty. Broken." The word wasn't spoken this time, but she felt it anyway. It followed her like a shadow, clinging to every step she took through pack territory. Broken girl. Broken wolf. A mistake the moon never bothered to fix. She reached the far edge of the clearing, where the packed earth gave way to uneven roots and fallen needles. This was where the pack stopped caring. Beyond this line lay the forgotten spaces, thin trails, crooked trees, and the small shelter she had pieced together from scraps no one wanted. "Hey!" someone shouted after her. "Don't forget to bow." Her shoulders stiffened. Slowly, she turned back. The circle of wolves watched her with open amusement, eyes bright, bodies relaxed. None of them felt threatened. Why would they? She was nothing. She lowered her head, bending just enough to satisfy them. The Nutcracker remained upright in her arms, his carved jaw set in its eternal, defiant line. The laughter softened, turning lazy and satisfied. The moment she straightened, they lost interest. She walked away. Inside her shelter, the air was still. The walls were thin, the roof uneven, but it was quiet here. Safe, in its own fragile way. She set the Nutcracker carefully against the small table she had built from a fallen log, making sure he faced the narrow window where the light slipped in. "There," she murmured. "You can see the trees." She knelt to light the small fire, fingers numb from the cold. The flames flickered weakly at first, then steadied. Warmth crept back into her hands. She glanced at the Nutcracker as she always did, searching his painted eyes. They were dark, glossy, carved to look stern and unyielding. "Ridiculous," the pack said. "Childish. Pathetic." But he never laughed. She reached out and brushed a smear of dirt from his sleeve, her touch slow and reverent. "I know they're cruel," she said quietly. "They always have been." The words spilled out before she could stop them. They always did, here, where no one interrupted. "Sometimes I wonder if the moon made a mistake with me. If I was meant to be something else. Something stronger." Her throat tightened. She swallowed and kept going. "But if I was, I don't think I'd be kind. And I'd rather be kind than like them." The fire popped softly. For a moment, nothing happened. The world stayed exactly as it was. Silent. Unchanged. Then she felt it. Not a sound. Not a movement. Warmth. It pulsed faintly beneath her palm where it rested against the Nutcracker's wooden chest. So subtle she almost missed it. A gentle thrum, like a heartbeat remembered rather than heard. Her breath caught. She pulled her hand back, staring. The wood looked the same. Cold. Inanimate. Impossible. "I'm just tired," she whispered, forcing a small, sad smile. "That's all." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying distant voices. Angrier now. Louder. She caught fragments through the trees. "Sick of it. Burn the thing. Teach her a lesson. Her stomach dropped. She stood quickly, heart pounding, and grabbed the Nutcracker, pulling him close as if her body could shield him from what was coming. Fear curled tight in her chest, sharp and familiar. "They won't," she said, though her voice shook. "I won't let them." The warmth flared again, stronger this time. And deep beneath the earth, far older than the pack, something stirred. She did not sleep that night. She sat with her back against the wall, knees drawn close, the Nutcracker resting in her lap as if he belonged there, because he did. The fire burned low, casting long shadows that stretched and shrank with every flicker. Outside, the forest whispered, branches brushing together like anxious voices. Her fingers remained pressed to the smooth wood of his chest. The warmth was gone now. Or maybe it had never truly been there. She couldn't be sure. Fear had a way of inventing sensations, of turning hope into something dangerous. Still, she didn't move him. Dawn crept in slowly, pale and grey. When the first light touched the Nutcracker's painted face, she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Morning meant work. It always did. She left the shelter quietly, choosing the narrow paths the pack rarely used. By the time she reached the communal grounds, the others were already there. Orders were given without looking at her. Tasks assigned as if she were part of the tools rather than the pack. She scrubbed floors until her hands burned. Hauled water until her shoulders screamed. Carried messages no one bothered to thank her for. Invisible when she obeyed. Visible only when she failed. As she worked, she heard them, whispers that followed her like flies. No wolf scent. Didn't shift again last full moon. Useless. They spoke of her rejection as if she weren't standing right there. As if the moment her wolf failed to fully awaken, she had stopped being real. She remembered the day they decided it. She had stood in the circle, trembling, waiting for the change that never came. The moon had risen full and bright, blessing everyone but her. One by one, the others had shifted, fur, power, strength, until she was alone, shaking and human beneath the open sky. The Alpha hadn't looked angry, just disappointed. From that moment on, she had been marked without a scar. Low status. Unclaimed. Unwanted. By midday, her body ached with a familiar, dull exhaustion. She finished her last task and slipped away before anyone could find another reason to keep her longer. No one stopped her. No one ever did. The forest welcomed her back with cool shade and the scent of earth. She walked faster now, heart pulling her toward the only place she could breathe. When she reached her shelter, relief washed over her so strongly her knees nearly buckled. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, pressing her forehead to the rough wood. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would feel like to belong somewhere without earning it. To be chosen simply because someone wanted her there. A foolish thought. She crossed the room and set the Nutcracker back on the table. Sunlight brushed his carved features, catching in the cracks and worn edges. He looked older in the light. Ancient. Even. As if he had survived more than she could imagine. "I used to dream," she said softly, sitting on the floor before him. "When I was little." Her voice sounded strange in the quiet. Too honest. But she continued anyway. She always did. "I thought I'd find a place where I didn't have to shrink. Where I wouldn't be in the way." She traced the curve of his wooden hand. "I don't need much. Just safety. A corner where I can rest without fear." The words trembled as they left her. "I don't even need to be loved," she admitted. "Just seen." Her throat tightened, and she looked down before the tears could fall. She hated crying. It felt like proof. A single tear escaped anyway, landing on the Nutcracker's chest. She froze. The air shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No wind. No sound. Just a subtle change, like the moment before a storm breaks. Warmth bloomed beneath her fingers. This time, it didn't fade. Her breath stuttered. Slowly, she pressed her palm flat against the wood. The heat was unmistakable now, seeping into her skin, steady and real. Not fire. Not magic, she understood. Something alive. She pulled her hand back, heart racing. "That's not possible." The Nutcracker didn't move. His painted eyes remained fixed, his jaw locked in its carved scowl. And yet, she felt it again. A pulse. Slow. Strong. Patient. Like something listening. A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of awe. She leaned closer without realizing it, her voice barely more than breath. "Can you hear me?" The warmth surged, just slightly. Enough. Her eyes filled, not with pain this time, but with something fragile and terrifying. Hope. Outside, unseen by her, the forest grew quiet. Birds fell silent. The wind stilled. And deep within the wood she touched, something bound and buried shifted its attention fully toward her, for the first time in centuries. She didn't tell anyone what she felt. Not because she feared mockery, she had long since learned how little their laughter mattered, but because the warmth felt like a secret meant only for her. Something fragile. Something that would shatter if named too loudly. Days passed, measured by work and silence. Yet everything felt different now. Sharper. Closer. As if the world had leaned in to listen. She began to notice things she had never noticed before. How the Nutcracker's presence seemed to steady her breathing when her thoughts spiraled. How the shadows in her shelter no longer felt empty at night. How the forest itself seemed to bend subtly toward her path when she walked home, branches parting just enough to spare her skin. She told herself it was coincidence. But coincidence did not explain the way the cracked wood beneath her fingertips warmed every time she spoke from the heart. She sat with him each evening, knees tucked beneath her, the fire low and steady. She spoke softly, careful with her words, as though speaking too loudly might wake something that was not yet ready. "I heard something today," she murmured one night, tracing the edge of his carved sleeve. "The elders were talking." Her lips pressed together. They mentioned the old stories. The ones they don't like to tell. The warmth stirred. She swallowed. They said there was once an alpha king before this pack. Before the borders were carved and the rules hardened. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward. They said he vanished. That the land rejected him. Or that he betrayed us. She shook her head slowly. But their voices didn't sound certain. Just afraid. The warmth deepened, spreading beneath her palm like a slow exhale. Her breath caught. "Were you real?" she whispered. "Were you him?" The Nutcracker remained still. Silent. Wooden. And yet, an image brushed against her thoughts. Not a memory, not truly. More like a feeling shaped into form. Dark forests beneath silver moons. Power restrained. Rage buried beneath duty. A crown heavy with responsibility rather than glory. She gasped and pulled her hand away, heart pounding. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." The feeling faded, retreating like a tide. She pressed her fists to her eyes, fighting the ache in her chest. "I don't need answers," she said quickly, as if reassuring both of them. "I just didn't want you to be alone." That night, she dreamed. She stood in a forest older than any she had known. The trees were enormous, their roots like coiled serpents. Moonlight filtered through thick branches, painting everything in silver and shadow. She wasn't afraid. A presence stood behind her. Tall. Immense. She could feel it without turning. When she did, she saw only eyes, burning gold, filled with restraint so deep it hurt to look at. She woke with her heart racing and her hands clenched in the blanket. The warmth lingered in her palms long after the dream faded. From then on, the small, impossible things began to happen. When she was cornered by a pair of wolves who enjoyed reminding her of her place, a branch cracked loudly nearby, drawing their attention away. When she slipped on wet stone near the river, a root rose just enough to catch her foot. When a cold night crept in, her shelter seemed warmer than it should have been. Protection. Not loud. Not violent. Deliberate. She never spoke of it. But she thanked him anyway. "I know you can't answer," she said one evening, brushing dirt from his boots. "And that's all right. I'm not asking you to." Her voice softened. "Just stay." The warmth pulsed once, slow and steady. She smiled, a real one this time. Small. Private. But the pack noticed change the way predators noticed weakness, or strength. Eyes lingered on her longer. Whispers sharpened. The elders watched her from the corners of their vision, brows furrowed. Something ancient stirred in their territory, and they felt it. Fear crept into their voices. She's meddling with old things, someone muttered as she passed. Curses, another hissed. That's what broken wolves bring. She heard them. Of course she did. That night, she knelt before the Nutcracker, hands resting gently against the wood. Her voice trembled for the first time in days. They're afraid, she whispered. And afraid wolves destroy what they don't understand. The warmth surged, stronger than ever before. Along with it came something new. Not an image. A promise. Unspoken, but heavy with intent. She pressed her forehead to his carved chest, eyes closing. Whatever you are, she breathed, you don't deserve to be a prisoner. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the distant echo of a growl, low, restrained, and very much alive. The trouble did not come quietly. It arrived with voices raised too high, with boots crushing leaves instead of skirting around them. It arrived with torches, their flames bright and hungry against the dimming sky. She sensed it before she heard it fully. A tightening in her chest. The warmth beneath her palms flaring sharp and urgent, no longer gentle. Her head lifted slowly. No, she whispered. Outside her shelter, shadows multiplied. The forest recoiled, branches shuddering as if bracing for impact. She rose to her feet, heart hammering, and turned just as the door was kicked inward with a splintering crack. Light flooded the small space. Harsh. Unforgiving. They filled the doorway, wolves and humans alike, faces twisted with something between excitement and disgust. Someone laughed as their gaze landed on the Nutcracker standing by the table. There it is, a man said, lifting his torch higher. The monster. Her body moved before her thoughts could catch up. She stepped in front of the table, arms spreading instinctively, as though she could shield him with nothing but herself. Please, she said, the word tearing free of her throat. He hasn't done anything. A woman scoffed. Listen to her. Still pretending it's alive. An elder stepped forward, his eyes cold and sharp. You've been warned, he said. This territory does not tolerate curses. It's not a curse, she said desperately. I swear. Silence. The word snapped like a whip. She flinched, but she didn't move aside. Someone reached past her, fingers closing around the Nutcracker's wooden arm. She screamed. The sound tore out of her, raw and unrestrained. She clutched at him, her nails scraping against wood as she tried to pull him back. Stop. Her voice broke. Please, stop. Laughter burst out around her. Rough hands shoved her backward. She stumbled, catching herself against the table as the Nutcracker was ripped from her grasp. Careful, a voice mocked. She might bite. They dragged him outside. The air was thick with smoke and anticipation. A crude pyre had already been built, old branches, broken crates, scraps of furniture torn from her shelter. Her things. Her small, fragile life. They tossed the Nutcracker onto the pile like refuse. No, she sobbed, dropping to her knees. Please. Take me instead. No one listened. A torch was lowered. Flames licked the edges of the wood, crawling hungrily upward. Heat washed over her face. The crackle was deafening. Something inside her shattered. She surged forward, heedless of the hands that grabbed at her arms, heedless of the heat. She threw herself over the pyre, wrapping her body around the Nutcracker, her back exposed, her face pressed to his wooden chest. Don't touch him, she cried, voice hoarse. You'll have to burn me too. Gasps rippled through the crowd. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The warmth beneath her skin exploded. It wasn't gentle anymore. The ground trembled. Flames guttered, bending away from her as if struck by an unseen force. The torches flickered wildly, smoke swirling in sudden, violent spirals. A sound rolled through the clearing. Low, deep, not loud, but powerful enough to silence every voice. A growl. It did not come from any throat they could see. The elders stiffened. Wolves stepped back instinctively, hackles rising. Even the flame seemed to recoil, shrinking, bowing. She felt it then, Not fear, but presence. Enormous. Ancient. Furious. The nutcracker beneath her arms burned hot, not with fire, but with restrained rage. Emotion poured into her, overwhelming and unmistakable. Anger, yes. But more than that, protectiveness. For her. Enough, a voice whispered, not aloud, but inside her chest. Heavy. Commanding. Held back by chains she could feel but not see. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to him. I'm here, she whispered back, not knowing how she knew to answer. I won't leave you. The wind roared suddenly, whipping through the clearing with savage force. Torches were torn from hands and hurled into the dirt. Flames died, snuffed out as if the world itself refused to let them rise again. Wolves stumbled. Someone cried out in fear. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The forest fell deathly still. She lay shaking over the pyre, her body trembling with exhaustion and shock. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her head. The nutcracker was untouched. No scorch marks. No ash. Only warmth. Steady. Alive. The pack stared in silence now. No laughter remained. Only fear, and something darker. The elder's face had gone pale. This ends now, he said, his voice tight. She is dangerous. Strong hands grabbed her arms, hauling her away despite her cries. She reached for the nutcracker, fingers stretching until they lost purchase, until he was dragged from her sight and wrapped in heavy cloth, sealed away like a sin. No, she screamed. You don't understand. They didn't let her finish. As she was pulled from the clearing, tears blurring her vision, she felt it one last time. Not rage. Not fear. A promise, pressed into her soul like a vow. Hold on. And somewhere beneath layers of wood, curse, and ancient restraint, something finally began to break. Darkness wrapped around her like a second skin. Not the gentle darkness of sleep, but the suffocating kind, thick, heavy, and smelling of damp earth and old stone. Her wrists ached where rough rope bit into her skin, bound tight behind her back. When she shifted, pain flared along her shoulders, sharp enough to steal her breath. She forced herself to stay quiet. Fear had a sound. She knew that now. It made wolves careless. Time blurred. It might have been minutes or hours before she felt it. The warmth. Not against her palms this time, but deep in her chest, spreading outward like a slow-burning ember. It steadied her breathing, anchored her thoughts before panic could drag her under. He was still there. Tears slid silently down her temples, soaking into the dirt beneath her cheek. I'm sorry, she whispered, barely daring to form the words. I couldn't protect you. The warmth answered, not flaring, not retreating, but pressing close, firm and present. Along with it came emotion so raw it stole the air from her lungs. Not blame. Grief. Fury, contained so tightly it hurt. And beneath it all, something startlingly gentle. Her. She gasped softly as the bond brushed her awareness more clearly than ever before. Images flickered at the edge of her mind, not memories, but impressions. Stone halls beneath a blood-red moon. Knees bent in obedience. A crown laid down willingly, and a knife driven deep in betrayal. A curse forged from treachery and fear. Wood was only the shell. The prison. Her breath shook. They did this to you, she murmured. Didn't they? The answer came not in words, but in weight. In the sense of time stretching endlessly forward while power rotted in stillness. In rage locked behind restraint so absolute it had become its own kind of agony. She swallowed hard. You're an alpha, she breathed, the truth settling into her bones. A king. The warmth surged at the word, not pride, but recognition. Yes. Her heart pounded painfully. All this time, she had spoken to him as one speaks to an object, a comfort. She had told him her fears, her small hopes, her loneliness. And he had listened. Unable to answer. Unable to move. Bound by magic that feared his voice more than his claws. A sob tore free before she could stop it. You shouldn't have been alone, she whispered fiercely. No one should. The ropes around her wrists creaked suddenly, fibers groaning as if strained by unseen hands. She stiffened, eyes wide in the darkness. The warmth flared, sharp now, strained. No. The word wasn't spoken, but it struck her with undeniable clarity. Don't hurt yourself. She froze. Her pulse thundered in her ears. You felt that, she whispered in awe. You felt them hurting me. The bond tightened, emotion pouring through, protective, restrained, furious at its own helplessness. I know, she said softly, despite the fear curling in her stomach. You can't come. You're bound. Another sensation brushed her awareness then. Not rage this time. Pain. Deep. Endless. Patient. The kind that had learned how to wait. They wrapped you, she murmured, piecing it together. Sealed you away again. A flicker of acknowledgement. Her jaw clenched. Even now, even after what the pack had done, he was holding back. Not because he lacked power, but because unleashing it would destroy everything around him, including her. Her breathing slowed as understanding settled in. You're protecting me, she realized. Even now. The warmth steadied, easing slightly. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to the cold ground. Then let me do something too. Silence stretched between them, taut and listening. I choose you, she said quietly. The words felt heavier than any vow she had ever heard. Not because of what you are. Not because of power or crowns or fear. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. I choose you because you listened when no one else did. Because you stayed. The bond surged, flooding her with emotion so intense she cried out softly. Wonder. Relief. Something dangerously close to hope. Chosen. Not by fate. By heart. The rope snapped. She gasped as the tension vanished, fibers falling away from her wrists as if cut by invisible claws. Blood rushed back into her hands in sharp, painful waves. She rolled onto her side, clutching her arms to her chest, shaking. Footsteps echoed somewhere above. Voices. Angry. Alarmed. She pushed herself up, heart racing. They're coming, she whispered urgently. You have to stay hidden. I'll find you. I promise. The warmth pulsed. Once. Strong. Certain. A final impression brushed her mind before the connection eased, retreating just enough to keep her safe. Chains straining. Cracks spreading. A king on his knees, not in submission, but restraint. She stumbled toward the darkness ahead, breath ragged, knowing with terrifying certainty that something ancient had shifted, and that when he finally spoke, the world would listen. She did not return to her shelter. There was nothing left of it now but scattered ash and broken wood, and even if there had been, she knew eyes would be waiting. The pack did not forgive what it feared. It watched. It hunted. So she moved through the forgotten paths instead, deeper into the forest where the light thinned and the ground grew uneven. Every step sent pain flaring through her wrists where the ropes had bitten, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was still here. Still moving. Still chosen. The warmth stayed with her as she walked, subtle, steady, a presence just behind her heart. Not guiding her feet, not commanding her steps. Simply there. Watching. Guarding. She found a hollow beneath the roots of an ancient oak, its trunk split by lightning long ago but still alive. Moss cushioned the ground. The air smelled of damp earth and old rain. It was hidden enough. For now. She sank down, exhaustion finally catching her, and pressed her palms to her knees, breathing through the tremor that ran through her body. You shouldn't be wasting your strength on me, she whispered into the quiet. I can hide. I always have. The warmth answered with a slow, unmistakable pulse. Not wasting. Protecting. Her throat tightened. She leaned back against the tree, eyes closing as the bond wrapped around her more clearly than before. She felt him then, not just as warmth, but as awareness. As if he stood at the edge of the world, straining against the limits of his prison. She pictured him wrapped and sealed away, buried by hands that feared his name. The thought made her chest ache. I'll be careful, she promised. I won't draw attention. I'll bring you what you need. The forest seemed to listen. From that day on, she lived between moments. She moved at dawn and dusk, avoiding the pack's patrols, foraging where the land dipped low and the trees grew thick. Each time danger crept too close, something subtle intervened. A snapped twig drawing attention elsewhere. A sudden scent masking her trail. A heaviness in her chest urging her to stop just before stepping into sight. Protection without touch. She brought water to the place where she sensed him buried, pouring it carefully over the earth as if it were an offering. She spoke to him in murmurs, her voice low and steady. "I found berries today," she told him once, kneeling in the shadows. "The sweet kind. I remembered how you liked listening when I described things." The warmth deepened, a quiet satisfaction brushing her thoughts. At night, she slept lightly, curled against roots or stone, always half aware. When nightmares came, and they did, sharp and cruel, she felt him then most of all. Not invading the dream, not chasing it away, but standing between her and the fear until it loosened its grip. Gradually, something inside her began to mend. She realized it one evening as she cleaned a shallow cut on her arm, hands steady where they once would have shaken. Her reflection in the dark water looked the same. Thin, tired, marked by old bruises, but her eyes were different. They held space now. Presence. She wasn't alone in herself anymore. The pack noticed. They spoke her name more often, their voices edged with unease. Patrols lingered near the deeper forest. Elders argued in hushed tones, their fear bleeding into the air like smoke. "She's changing," someone muttered one night as she passed unseen through the trees. "She's not afraid," another answered. They were right. Fear still came, but it no longer ruled her. Because when it rose, she felt him, silent, contained, watching the world with ancient patience. She understood now that his restraint was not weakness. It was discipline forged through centuries of bearing too much power alone. "You don't have to hold it all forever," she whispered one night, resting her hand against the earth where he lay. "I'm here." The warmth flared, gentle and aching. A thought brushed her mind then, clearer than before. Not words, but meaning shaped into certainty. "As long as you are, I endure." Her breath hitched. She pressed her forehead to the ground, tears slipping free. Not of sorrow this time, but of something dangerously close to peace. Far away, in the heart of the pack's territory, the land shifted uneasily. Old magic stirred beneath stone and soil, responding to a bond that was no longer one-sided. Chains strained again. And the pack, sensing the change they had tried so hard to smother, began to prepare, not knowing they were already too late. They came for her at dusk. She felt it before she saw them, the warmth in her chest tightening suddenly, no longer calm but coiled, strained. A warning. Her hand stilled where it rested against the earth, fingers digging into damp soil. "No," she whispered. The forest had gone too quiet. No birds. No insects. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She rose slowly from beneath the oak roots, senses sharp, every instinct screaming. She had just taken a step back when the shadows shifted and wolves emerged from between the trees, their movements practiced, deliberate. Elders. Guards. The ones who spoke with authority and carried fear like a weapon. "There she is," one of them said. "Still hiding like vermin." She straightened despite the tremor in her legs. Running would only make it worse. She knew that now. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. An elder stepped forward, his expression carved from stone. "You will come with us." "For what?" Her heart pounded, but she didn't look away. "I've broken no law." A humorless smile tugged at his mouth. "You are the law we're ending." Hands seized her arms before she could react. She cried out, not in fear, but in rage, and struggled as they bound her wrists with thick rope carved with symbols she recognized too late. Binding runes. "No," she gasped. "You don't understand. We understand enough," a woman snapped, tightening the rope until pain shot through her shoulders. "Witchcraft. Corruption. You've poisoned this land." The warmth inside her surged violently, slamming against the bond like a caged storm. "Don't." The warning tore through her chest, sharp and desperate. She bit back a sob. He felt this. Every rough pull. Every cruel word. "I'm sorry," she whispered under her breath, not to them, but to him. They dragged her through the forest, ignoring her stumbling steps, ignoring the way the ground itself seemed to resist them. Roots snagged their boots. Branches lashed out. But the elders pressed on, fear lending them cruelty. When they reached the pack grounds, torches flared to life. Wolves gathered quickly, drawn by the promise of spectacle. She was shoved to her knees in the center of the clearing, dirt biting into her skin. "She's the source," the elder announced. "The curse. The unrest. The blight." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She talks to things that shouldn't exist. She brings old magic back. She made the fire turn." Accusations piled atop one another, heavy and senseless. She lifted her head, eyes searching the crowd for mercy she already knew she wouldn't find. "This land was peaceful before her," the elder continued. "Before she meddled." A lie. But lies were easier than truth. "She will be punished," he said coldly. "Exiled at dawn. Or executed if the land does not settle." A roar of approval answered him. Her breath left her in a shaky rush. Exile meant death. Execution meant worse. The warmth inside her exploded against the bindings, raw and ferocious. "No. No." The ground beneath her knees trembled. Wolves stilled, glancing around uneasily. The elder raised his staff sharply. "Silence." She bowed her head, fighting the urge to scream. Not now. If he broke free now, it would destroy everything. Everyone. And he would never forgive himself. They dragged her away again, this time toward the old stone holding cell beneath the pack hall. Cold air swallowed her as they shoved her inside and slammed the door shut, iron locking into place with a final, echoing clang. Darkness. She sagged against the wall, knees folding beneath her. The runes burned against her wrists, cutting her off from the warmth she had come to rely on. For the first time in days, she felt alone. Tears slid down her cheeks unchecked. "I didn't mean for this," she whispered into the dark. "I just wanted you to not be alone." Silence answered. Then, faintly, so faintly she almost missed it, she felt him again. Distant. Straining. Furious. "They're sealing me." The understanding hit her like ice water. Somewhere above, hands wrapped him in heavy cloth soaked in binding oils. Somewhere, earth was being piled over ancient wood. Somewhere, they were trying to bury a king twice over. Her chest convulsed. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I failed you." The bond surged suddenly, burning through the distance with raw force. "You did not fail." The certainty in it stole her breath. "They fear what loves you." Chain screamed in protest somewhere deep below the earth. She curled in on herself, pressing her forehead to the cold stone floor. "If I don't survive this," she whispered, "remember that I chose you. Always." A pause. Then something shifted. Not a surge. A crack. The ground shuddered once, hard enough that dust rained from the ceiling. Above her, wolves cried out in alarm. And far beneath the pack's territory, buried under layers of fear, betrayal, and ancient magic, the restraint that had held for centuries finally began to fail. Not because of rage, but because someone worth protecting was about to be lost. The earth split with a sound like a scream being torn in half. Deep beneath the pack's territory, where roots choked the soil and old magic slept uneasily, the bindings finally gave way. The oil soaked into the wrappings around the carved form began to boil, hissing as symbols burned themselves into ash. The warmth she had felt for so long did not surge. It detonated. The wood cracked, not gently, not carefully, but violently, as if something inside refused to be contained another second longer. Ancient magic screamed as it tore free, shredding the curse strand by strand. Each layer fell away with a sound like breaking bone. Rage poured into the space where silence had ruled for centuries. Not blind fury. Focused. Purposeful. The ground above buckled. Stone walls groaned. Wolves stumbled as the land itself rejected stillness. And from the shattered shell of wood, he rose. Flesh replaced carving in a rush of heat and power. Bone shifted. Muscle formed. Fur erupted in a storm of shadow and silver, taller and broader than any wolf the pack had ever known. His eyes opened, burning gold, ancient and unyielding. The Alpha King drew his first breath in centuries. It shook the forest. A roar tore from his chest, raw and unrestrained, ripping through the night sky. Trees bowed outward as the force of it rippled through the land. Wolves miles away dropped to their knees, instinct screaming submission before their minds could catch up. The pack hall collapsed inward with a thunderous crash. Inside the stone cell, she cried out as the ground lurched beneath her. She was thrown forward, palms slamming into the floor as dust and debris rained down. Her ears rang, heart hammering painfully. What? Her breath caught. The warmth. It flooded back into her, no longer distant or restrained. It wrapped around her like arms, fierce and absolute. Emotion surged through the bond so powerfully it stole the air from her lungs. Freedom. Rage. And beneath it, panic. For her. His head snapped upward, senses locking onto a single point in the world. The bond was no longer a thread. It was a tether, unbreakable and blazing bright. She's alive. The Alpha King launched forward. The forest did not slow him. Trees split as he passed. Stone shattered beneath his claws. Every step cracked the earth, power rolling outward in waves that forced wolves flat to the ground. Those who tried to flee found their legs buckling, their bodies betraying them as instinct crushed rebellion. This was not dominance learned. This was dominance remembered. The elders felt him before they saw him. Fear curdled into terror as the air thickened, heavy with pressure that stole breath and courage alike. "His real," someone whispered, voice breaking. "The king, his real." The Alpha King emerged into the clearing in a storm of fur and shadow, eyes blazing like twin suns. He did not slow, did not speak. He did not need to. Every wolf dropped. Some fell to their knees. Others collapsed completely, foreheads pressed to the earth in instinctive surrender. No command had been given. It was simply impossible not to obey. The cell door exploded inward under a single strike of his claws. Iron screamed as it was torn from stone. She shielded her face as the wall gave way, coughing as dust filled the air. When she looked up, her breath left her in a soundless gasp. He filled the doorway. Massive. Terrifying. Beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. His fur shimmered with silver beneath the moonlight, marked with ancient sigils burned into flesh rather than carved into wood. Power rolled off him in suffocating waves. But when his gaze locked onto her, everything softened. He crossed the space in 2 strides and stopped abruptly, as if an invisible line held him back. His massive head lowered slowly, reverently, until his burning eyes were level with hers. She was shaking, bruised, bound, alive. A sound rumbled in his chest, not a growl this time, but something closer to pain. Carefully, impossibly gently, he nudged the ropes at her wrists with his nose. They disintegrated into ash. She swayed as circulation rushed back into her hands. Before she could fall, his body shifted again. Bones cracking, fur retreating as he forced himself into a form small enough not to crush her. He knelt. The Alpha King of legend, terror of traitors, ruler of blood and land, lowered himself fully to the stone floor before her. Gasps echoed from the shattered doorway behind him. He reached out with a trembling hand, stopping inches from her face, waiting. Permission. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. His fingers brushed her skin, reverent, as though touching her was an act of worship rather than possession. Power coiled tight around them, but it did not harm. "I'm here," she whispered, voice breaking. "You found me." His jaw clenched. When he spoke, his voice was rough and unused, dragged from a throat that had been silent for centuries. "I was never lost." The words were quiet. The impact was not. Behind them, wolves bowed deeper, terror and awe warring in their eyes. The land itself seemed to exhale, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. The Alpha King gathered her carefully into his arms, shielding her with his body as he turned to face the pack. His gaze swept over them, cold, controlled, lethal. "This ends," he said calmly. And every wolf present understood with bone-deep certainty, the age of their cruelty had just died. She couldn't speak at first. The world had narrowed to the circle of gold eyes that regarded her with an intensity that both terrified and comforted. His presence was a storm held in check, every inch of him coiled with power centuries old, yet it bent toward her like a tide drawn by a hidden moon. He knelt before her, massive shoulders folding with impossible restraint, eyes softening only for her. The bond they shared thrummed through her chest, warmth and fire mingling, steadying her like a tether to the living world. "You are," she whispered, but her words faltered. What could she possibly say to a being who had survived centuries of betrayal, imprisonment, and silence just to find her alive? "I am yours," he replied, voice low, barely audible, yet it carried farther than any roar could have. Not as a claim, not as dominance, but as truth. Tears fell freely, sliding down her cheeks as she reached for him. Her fingers trembled as they touched the golden fur along his jaw. His head lowered, careful not to crush her in his enormous strength. The earth trembled faintly beneath them, not in anger, but in acknowledgement. "You chose me," he said, barely a whisper, yet it sounded like a declaration to the entire world, even when no one else did. Her heart ached at the weight of it. For the first time, someone powerful did not demand her obedience. Someone fierce and untouchable bent entirely to the bond of their connection. She had not been foolish. She had not been weak. The pack, the wolves who had tormented her, the elders who had sentenced her, fell silent under his gaze. Their faces pale, their knees instinctively bowing. Every lie they had spoken, every mockery they had hurled, crumbled in the presence of the truth standing before them. He did not strike. He did not roar. His authority was in the stillness, in the weight of his restraint, in the undeniable reality that he had chosen her, and in that choosing, he had already claimed justice. She swallowed hard, her hands moving up to cradle his face. Golden eyes met hers, and for the first time, she felt seen in a way that no words, no protection, no survival could have ever given her. "You were never alone," he murmured. "Even when they tried to take everything, I was with you. And I will not leave you again." The ground shifted subtly beneath them as the pack collectively realized something they had never understood. Strength without heart is nothing. And she, small and broken in their eyes, had been the anchor that bound the Alpha King to the world. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "And I will not leave you." He inclined his head, close enough that her forehead pressed against his, warmth radiating, steadying, sacred. Silence settled around them, heavy and electric. The pack held their breath. The forest itself seemed to bow. In that stillness, all her fears, all her loneliness, all the shame that had been heaped upon her melted away. She had been mocked, rejected, hidden. But now, with the Alpha King kneeling before her, the world had shifted. The bond between them was no longer quiet. It had grown, blazing and undeniable. Every wolf who had doubted her could feel it radiating from the space between her and him. He whispered again, softer, just for her, "You are my chosen. Always." And she knew, deep in her bones, that she had always been exactly what he needed, and he, what she had been waiting for all her life. For the first time, the world did not frighten her. The pain of her past no longer bound her. Because here, in the arms of the Alpha King, she was not hidden. She was not broken. She was seen. And the world would never forget it. The clearing was silent, heavy with the weight of all that had come before. Wolves shifted uneasily, elders perched on jagged stones, and even the youngest pups sensed that tonight would change everything. Torches flickered in the chill air, but their light could not outshine the presence that filled the space. The Alpha King, towering and restrained, his golden eyes locked on the faces of those who had mocked, humiliated, and condemned her. She stood beside him, no longer shrinking or trembling. Her shoulders straightened, spine stiff as iron. The ash of her old shelter still clung faintly to her hair, a silent reminder of the cruelty she had endured. Yet she felt no fear. Only the quiet certainty that the world was finally balancing itself. The eldest of the pack coughed, attempting authority that had long since evaporated. This gathering is unnecessary," he stammered, voice quivering. She is mine," the Alpha King interrupted, his voice calm, low, but carrying a weight that made even the boldest wolf flinch. "And you," he gestured slowly to the gathered elders and their loyal followers, "failed her. Every one of you. Your cruelty, your mockery, your fear-driven judgment, it ends tonight." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some lowered their heads instinctively. Others froze, unable to look at the figure whose mere presence demanded obedience. She spoke to the wood, and you called it madness. She cared for what you could not understand, and you called it weakness. You abandoned her. You left her to be mocked, hunted, and punished for nothing but love and loyalty. One of the elder wolves tried to defend himself. She broke the laws. The Alpha King's gaze snapped toward him, and the air itself seemed to thicken. The only law broken here, he said slowly, each word measured and deliberate, was the law of justice. You all forgot that it exists. And now you will be held accountable. The pack watched as he signaled subtly, almost imperceptibly, and one by one, the guilty were forced to kneel. Their protests died in the pit of their throats as the power radiating from him pressed down. The weight of centuries, of wrongs committed and ignored, made the ground itself tremble beneath their knees. Her eyes swept the assembly. Faces she had once feared now reflected nothing but shame and helplessness. She realized, with a quiet, steady heartbeat, that she felt no triumph. No desire for revenge. Only clarity. Justice was not punishment for her. It was the truth finally being seen. The Alpha King raised his hands, not in violence, but in command. You will rebuild what you destroyed. You will care for what you mocked. You will speak only truth, and you will remember what it means to protect, not to dominate. Those who cannot obey this simple command will leave my territory forever. Murmurs of fear ran through the gathering. Some nodded, trembling, grateful for a chance to redeem themselves. Others turned, fleeing silently, knowing they could not face her gaze. She breathed in the crisp night air, letting it fill her lungs. The terror that had haunted her for years was gone, replaced by a steady, enduring strength she had not known she possessed. She had survived. She had endured. And now, the pack could no longer deny her place, her value, or her voice. The Alpha King stepped closer, his hand brushing lightly against hers. Warmth flared between them, not from magic, but from the undeniable bond that had carried them through centuries of silence and danger. You may rise, he said to her. She did so slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze upon her. But this time it did not crush her. For the first time, she looked at them, not with fear, not with shame, but with certainty. She was not their burden. She was not their weakness. She was seen, chosen, and protected. And the pack, for all their past cruelty, would remember this night forever. Her hand slid into his, fingers intertwining. The warmth between them pulsed, quiet and sure. She had survived exile. She had endured betrayal. And now, at last, justice had been served. The world had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. The clearing smelled of damp earth and firelight, but she hardly noticed. All around her, the pack still whispered, bowed, and shifted uneasily under the Alpha King's watchful gaze. Yet she did not feel fear, nor shame, nor doubt. She felt certain. He stood beside her now, immense and still restrained, a storm wrapped in calm. His golden eyes never left her face, and the warmth between them pulsed with quiet insistence. Not a command. Not a demand. But a truth that could not be denied. You are mine, he said simply, voice low and unyielding, and she felt it as fully as if he had pressed it into her chest. Not possession, not dominance. A promise. A declaration. A claim born of love and recognition, not fear. She drew a breath, steadying herself. She had imagined this moment countless times, dreamed of it when she was alone, broken, and afraid, but reality surpassed every vision. He was not angry. He was not cruel. He was deliberate, protective, and absolute in his devotion. The pack murmured in astonishment. They had lived centuries believing power meant fear, that dominance demanded submission. But here was something they had never witnessed. The Alpha kneeling not to assert authority, but to honor the one who had chosen him. He extended his hand toward her, fingers brushing hers, and the forest seemed to hush in reverence. She stepped forward, not because she was required, but because she wanted to. I have always chosen you, she whispered, voice trembling yet firm. Not because you are powerful, or feared, or extraordinary, but because you saw me. And you stayed. He inclined his head, the faintest of smiles touching his lips. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, slow and deliberate. Strength is not in ruling alone. Strength is in choosing who to stand beside. And I have chosen you. The pack watched in stunned silence. Even the elders dared not breathe. Every mock, every cruel word they had spoken, every ounce of disbelief, crumbled beneath the weight of this quiet truth. "You are queen," he continued, voice resonant, carrying farther than the night air should allow. "Not because of blood, not because of fear, but because of heart, courage, and the loyalty you have shown, not to me alone, but to yourself." Her chest tightened. She had spent so long believing her kindness, her loyalty, her care, had been weaknesses. And now, standing beside the Alpha King, she realized they were her greatest power. "I accept," she said softly, but every syllable carried certainty. "Not because you ask it. Not because I must. But because I choose it." The forest seemed to exhale. Wolves and humans alike faltered under the weight of the moment, knowing without question that she had claimed her place, not granted, not given, but earned and chosen. He lowered his forehead to hers, and in that contact, the world fell away. The past, the mockery, the isolation, the endless fear, collapsed behind them. There was only this: two hearts entwined, two souls recognized, two lives bound not by fate, but by deliberate, unwavering love. The murmurs of the pack faded into silence, and finally, a single truth rang clear across the territory. She was not the girl who had hidden and whispered to carved wood. She was the woman who had been seen, chosen, and cherished by the Alpha King himself. And nothing, not mockery, not fear, not centuries of expectation, could ever undo that. Her hand slid fully into his. Fingers intertwined, warmth spreading through them both like fire and sunlight. The Alpha King straightened, towering beside her, but the storm around him had softened. His power no longer demanded obedience. It demanded recognition, and she was that recognition made flesh. Together, they faced the pack. Together, they faced the world. And together, they would be unstoppable. Dawn spilled over the territory like liquid gold, painting the trees in warm light and casting long shadows over the clearing where she and the Alpha King stood. The air smelled of pine and earth, clean and new, as if the world itself had exhaled after the chaos of the past days. She stepped forward, sunlight warming her skin, and felt the weight of every scar, every bruise, every moment of fear she had endured. But for the first time, none of it mattered. She was no longer the girl who whispered to carved wood in secret. She was alive. She was whole. And she was seen. He remained at her side, towering and immense, yet every movement he made was careful, deliberate, as though the world had not changed but she had, and he would not break her now that she had been made strong. His golden eyes softened as they met hers, warmth radiating without need for words. "They remember," she whispered, voice low, as if speaking aloud might shatter the fragile peace. "The pack, they know." He pressed a hand to hers, grounding her. The warmth pulsed through her like sunlight in the marrow. "Let them remember," he said. "They should remember what it means to see the truth, and what it costs to deny it." Together, they walked through the territory, the pack parting instinctively before them. Wolves and humans alike held a mix of awe and fear. No one dared question her place. No one dared question his choice. She reached the ruins of her old shelter, where ash still clung to the roots of the ancient oak. She knelt and let her fingers brush the ground. Memories surfaced, mockery, loneliness, whispered fears. But they no longer held power over her. She pressed her palm to the earth and let it sink in, offering a silent vow to herself and to him. That she would never shrink again, never apologize for love, never hide in fear. "You've grown," he murmured, voice deep, warm, carrying the weight of centuries. She looked up, meeting his gaze, and realized he had grown too, not in size, but in restraint, in depth, in devotion. The two of them had changed together, and together they had survived. She rose slowly, brushing dirt from her skirts, and he mirrored her, towering and protective. They stood side by side, a united presence in a world that had once tried to erase her. She lifted her head to the sky, sunlight glinting off the faint silver in his fur, and felt something she had never known, complete, unshakable peace. "You are no longer wooden," she said softly, turning to him. "And I am no longer broken." He inclined his massive head, golden eyes soft with pride and something deeper, something reserved for her alone. "And the world will remember," he said. "They will remember the woman who loved when no one else did, and the Alpha King who waited centuries to honor that love." For the first time, she laughed, a clear, melodic sound that echoed through the forest, washing away the shadows of the past. He smiled faintly, a rare, almost human curve of his lips, and lowered his head to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. The wind stirred, rustling leaves as though the trees themselves celebrated. The pack watched in silence, understanding that history had shifted. She was no longer small. She was no longer hidden. She was no longer afraid. She slipped her hand into his, fingers entwining naturally, as if they had been meant to fit together all along. They walked forward, side by side, leaving the ruins, leaving the shadows, leaving the girl who had whispered to a wooden nutcracker behind. Ahead of them lay sunlight, freedom, and a love that no one could take away. And the forest, the territory, and the pack would never forget the woman who chose, and was chosen, with all her heart. No longer wooden. No longer broken. Finally, whole.